Hello everybody and welcome back to the Tech Shop. I'm Ryan Wenzel, the Technical Director, and today we've got an interesting project. As you can see, I'm joined by a special guest today, and if you've been to any of our shows, I'm sure you've seen this and its counterpart in many of our productions. Sadly, it's time for these dragons to retire, and we want to preserve them in the state they're in right now so we can use them as examples in the future. So I suppose I could make exact copies out of them, but if I carved them out of wood, that would take forever. And if I carved them out of styrofoam, that would make a giant mess in my shop. So I guess the only other option is to do a 3D scan and try to 3D print them. This is something I've never done before. So we're going to attempt it and see if we can document the whole thing. The plan is to scan our dragon here with an Xbox One Connect. From there, we're going to put it into our computer software and see if we can mesh everything back together and fix any errors that are currently on the actual dragon itself. And then we're going to send it over to our friends over at SEC, over to Leroy, and he's actually going to print them off for us. And hopefully, we've created a exact replica of a lightweight model that you see before today. So first things first, we're going to have to build a studio and a Lazy Susan before we can start any of our scans. So let's get started. Do you want to help? No? Okay. All right, back again. So I've got some things set up here. I've got my chop saw on the ground for right now. We're going to build a real quick table at a little bit of scrap that I found around the house. And so that way I have something to elevate my saw so I can work on it a little safer. And then I've got some materials here for the Lazy Susan. And same thing, I'm going to use some hodgepodge pieces of wood I found around my house and the limited tools I have. Usually I would do this in the shop, but since we're quarantined, I can't do that in the shop. So first things first, build a real quick platform, and then we'll start on the build from there. Do you want to help? You being a big help? Yeah? Okay. Alright, so I built something I think can stay in this box. It's pretty stable and snug in there. And then I'm going to leave the top exposed so that way I can put the square, that wooden block of the dragon on top. And it seems like it works pretty well and doesn't really shift or anything. And it's going to be small enough that I can break it down and move the whole thing if I need to. I'm kind of short on space here at home, so I got to make sure I make the best out of every little thing that I have. So let's go give this a test and see how it works. All right, now that we have the studio set up and the Lazy Susan has been put together, we're going to go ahead and start to calibrate our scanner. We're going to work on making sure that the scanner is actually picking up the dragon. We're going to move it around, and we're going to mess with the depth of field. Once we've done that, I'll start manually scanning the dragon, and this is just me scanning it from a hardwire connected to a tripod, and I'll just be going through and scanning every single nook and cranny from the top on down, just making passes over and over again. I'll do this process approximately 3 times, ensuring that I get all angles of the dragon to include both sides, and then I'll try to put those all back together later with Blender. You can see in the bottom right corner that the dragon is actually getting built there in 3D, and I'll have to cut some of those additional parts out, but I can do that later. We're also going to do some spinning shots, and this is just the camera staying static and me rotating the Lazy Susan around so we can also get some additional scans. So now we're going to take about 100 to 150 high resolution photos, and what this is going to be is some reference images while we're actually sculpting and fixing the dragon in Blender. In addition, we're going to take all of these different photos and we are going to try and put them together with our already created model and MeshLab. When we put it into MeshLab, hopefully all these photos should come together and help create a really great display for our dragon. So here we are in MeshLab. We've uploaded all of our photos and we've already ran the program. You can see on the right-hand side all those little square boxes. Those are all the individual photos that we've taken. And as we rotate the camera around, you can see our dragon kind of taking shape. All the extra data in the background, all that metadata, we're going to cut out later, and we're going to try and merge our two models together once we export it into Blender. Now into Blender, we've put the two models together, but we haven't used any of the textures yet. You can see that some of the details are showing up pretty well already before we even start editing. As you can also see, we're also having some minor little cosmetic issues, which we'll go back through and we'll edit in this program. One of the best things is the sculpting tool. This will help us raise or subtract a surface to kind of smooth out certain areas that we want to fix or make better or fill a gap. This is the time we're going to do that. And as you can see here, the dragon's looking really great with those textures on. If we put it side by side with our original images here, you can see that the similarities are very striking. And all that detail that we took those photos with and did our scans are starting to pick up very well. Now we're going to convert the file into an STL, and we're going to send it over to Leroy and see if he can start printing.
Okay, so this is the image that Ryan sent me. This is the dragon after it's been 3D scanned. Fairly good detail. If we zoom in, you can kind of see where the detail lies. Obviously, it's going to be printed in whatever color material that we use. So what I've done is I put it in here, scaling it up with MakerBot Print, which is a CAD program for our specific Replicator Plus printer, 3D printers that we're using. So we have the dragon. I had to orient it on the x-axis to let it lie on the plate properly. Otherwise, it was a little bit cattywampus. And then what I'm doing is I'm adding these little build plates underneath it or by the side, and that's what that's going to do is support the wings and the tail as it goes. So what I'm going to do is add one more here. Zoom out a little bit. Too far. Okay. I'm going to orient it, the entire image upwards. So we're seeing it from a top view, and you can see how the tail has a little bit of a shadow there. So that's what we're going to add another build plate right there, just to help support that tail as it builds. So what I'm doing is I'm taking these other small plates, Command copy, Command release. So another one is created, and I find that in a file section up here, file, insert, example prints, all printers, and then it has all these different discs or things you can add to the project. So I found that these small helper discs are perfect for this project. So now I can just kind of orient this disc to sit right under the tail. Again, that's just basically to give it a little bit more structure as it prints. So the only other thing that's going to be kind of weird on this one is going to be this opening of the mouth. So the last thing that we do is have it build basically a breakaway structure that'll help support the wings all the way down to these builder plates. So support type, you might be able to see that. It says right here, support type. What I'm going to do is breakaway support. So after it prints, what's going to happen is these breakaway supports are going to connect to these extra pieces. We're just gonna be able to easily snap them off after the print is done. So as it's printing, it's gonna be a little weird. So we might do two videos on this, one with the breakaways and one without. This structure might work without, but I find that I don't like to mess with it. So we've got breakaway supports and pretty much ready to go at this point. Everything's scaled. It's gonna be approximately 3 to 5 inches tall. So now I'm going to hit this button that says Estimate and Print Preview. It's going to take a while because now it's rendering it to figure out how long the print will take, make sure that all of the formulas are in there properly. And so that's going to take a while. We're going to bring you back to the video of it printing. right, so what we have is two models that we made based on what Ryan had sent. As you can see on here, there's the breakaways that help support the structure. So like under the wing part here, and these breakaways just snap off. Now the problem with this size of a 3D model in general is that everything's pretty loose or easy to snap. So when you're breaking these breakaways apart, you just have to be really careful not to snap the structure itself as you go. So what I'm probably going to do on this one is go ahead and take an X-Acto knife, and I can cut through and kind of trim these off. Now another thing to note is this is the detail on this size of an item. The smaller it goes, the harder it is to get that detail exactly right. These are those build plates that I added in just to help this structure. I find that it just helps keep it to the base. I don't have a heated bed on my 3D printer, and so sometimes these tend to curl up. Having it so far away from the structure helps it so that the structure itself isn't the one curling, but it's the pad. So these curled up just a titch as it was printing, but the whole thing snaps off at this base. So that base can now be recycled or whatever, and we have the system, or the model. The secondary print was 24,000 times the scale. So got much better in detail with that. If you're looking at it, the detail on this one just isn't there, and the bigger you go, the more detail that you're going to be receiving. So the next step is going to be slicing the model up itself. So like the head would print as one piece, maybe the torso, the wings, they would all, and the tail, all printing off on different at different times, so I can get a large unit that I would then have to assemble into the base unit that we have. So I'm going to leave this one intact like this for Ryan to check out. I'm also going to leave this for Ryan to see what the breakaways do for future projects.
All right, so Leroy sent over the first test models, and they came out pretty amazing looking. Obviously, the bigger that they were printed out, the more detail that shows. So now that we know this works, we're going to start cutting these up in different pieces, so that way it's easier to print for us. And we're going to start printing out the full 3D model of the dragon. So stay tuned, and we'll post the next episode soon. All right, thanks for watching.